unveils the memorial. Major General Autry speaks in large black letters, less than 3 minutes. I'll work on that. 4 cycles ago, this group of people had a reunion. Following that, they went to Las Vegas and had a reunion, ever increasing in the number of participants. 2 years ago, we went to Nashville, and it had come to the minds of some that we ought to have a purpose. Besides being the B66 association of a bunch of guys that like to party and tell stories and that. And so before the meeting in Nashville, 4 or 5 emails went around and said, you know, we could have a purpose and develop a memorial. And there was a lot of email about that. At the meeting in Nashville, I said we ought to do something important or we ought to disband. And the guys said, we pick important. I'm proud to be here today to tell you that this memorial comes from the heart of each of us. We do not have corporate funding. We have your funding. We don't have the interest of others other than our comrades in mind. We don't owe this to anybody but you. And I'm proud to be a small part of a group that has built a memorial and dedicated it to our fellow airmen who gave the ultimate sacrifice for their country. I am proud to be a B66 Association member. Thank you.
What General Autry didn't tell you is I also only have 3 minutes. That was very good. Thank you, sir. General Reynolds, General Kirk, General Autry, General Metcalf, members of the families of our honored comrades, fellow B66ers, ladies and gentlemen. We're gathered here today to dedicate this memorial to our fallen comrades. Each man whose name is engraved on this stone died in the prime of life. All volunteered, none refused to do his duty, and all died with honor in the service of our country and in defense of our freedom. When the time came to make the final flight, none refused. Each said, "Here am I, send me." Many of our comrades died in faraway places. All were apart from family and home, but were never apart from their friends in the Air Force. Today, these friends and families and many others are gathered here to honor them. The inscription on this beautiful stone reads in part, "Always remember that freedom has a price." These men were asked to pay that price, and when the time came, each said, "Here am I, send me." And although they were struck down in the prime of life, their spirits live on in us, their comrades, and their families, and their friends in our armed forces. Their spirits were those of warriors, and warriors inevitably pay the price for all of us, a price often paid in blood and lives, a lesson that we are again learning today as our forces are fighting and dying for our freedom. And these young men and women who are fighting today are stepping forward and saying, "Here am I, send me." Let us hope that future generations will view this memorial to our comrades and be inspired by their example. Let us hope that when the freedom of America is again threatened, and make no mistake, it will be, they too will step forward and say, "Here am I, send me." We dedicate this memorial to the memory of our comrades who died, and to their families and friends, and to all who served with the B66. As most of you know, having spent time in or associated with the military, it's a long-standing custom to call the roll of a military unit at various times. At the end of the roll call, the adjutant reports to the commander. All present are accounted for. We will call the roll of our deceased members, and a comrade will answer here. At the end of the roll call, as in all military units, all personnel will be accounted for. Lieutenant Richard J. Dinger.
Here.
Airman Second Class Arthur J. Dufresne Jr.
Here.
Lieutenant Dan K. Henderson. Tech Sergeant Stanley P. Platts.
Here.
Captain Arthur J. Manzo.
Here.
Captain John A. Runyon.
Here.
Lieutenant Glenn D. Watson. Lieutenant Thomas C. Bryce. Captain Wilfred E. Cather. Captain Don F. Chandler. Lieutenant Robert A. Chase. Lieutenant Smith Davis Jr.
Here.
Captain Robin W. Gray. Lieutenant Robert B. Hancock. Lieutenant Helmut Hyman. Staff Sergeant Howard M. Hicks.
Here.
Captain Richard W. Hughes. Captain Joseph D. Leffler.
Here.
Mr. Blaine L. Maines. Lieutenant Lawton D. Mueller. Airman First Class Julius J. Roush. Mr. George E. Sarabale. Captain James N. Stitzel. Captain Howard E. Strandberg. Captain George A. Taylor. Captain Roger E. Taylor. Technical Sergeant Bernard M. Valencia. Lieutenant Charles L. Boone.
Here.
Lieutenant Gary R. Code.
Here.
Captain Alan H. Day. Lieutenant Harold W. Glandon. Captain James L. Unge.
Here.
Airman Second Class Michael J. Kemp.
Here.
Lieutenant William H. McCaslin.
Here.
Airman Second Class Ralph L. Noel.
Here.
Lieutenant James T. Powell, Jr. Captain Julian T. Stewart, Jr. Captain Harry V. Armani.
Here.
Major Paul W. Brooks. Captain Ralph L. Davenport, Jr. Captain Daniel Harvey. Captain Jesse Kindler. Captain Paul J. Savage.
Here.
Lieutenant Frank L. Whitley, Jr. Lieutenant William R. Baycraft. Staff Sergeant Leroy Buffalo Jr. Lieutenant Reynolds W. McKay. Lieutenant James T. Waymark. Captain William X. Cox Jr. Captain Robert L. Mann.
Here.
Lieutenant James A. McEwen. Captain John Wager Jr. Technical Sergeant Charles Borderline. Captain John B. Causey. Lieutenant Donald E. Laird. Captain Dwight A. Lindley.
Here.
Lieutenant Craig R. Nobert. Lieutenant Colonel Herbert Doby.
Here.
Captain Ray L. Deffen.
Here.
Captain Carl D. Heasel.
Here.
Lieutenant Theodore W. Johnson.
Here.
Lieutenant Paul S. Krisnowick.
Here.
Major William E. McDonald. Captain Larry A. Moore.
Here.
Major Max E. Nichols.
Here.
Lieutenant Colonel Russell A. Poor. Colonel Woodrow H. Wilburn.
Here.
Lieutenant Colonel Jack M. Youngs. Major Pollard H. Mercer, Jr.
Here.
Lieutenant Colonel Edwin P. Anderson, Jr.
Here.
Captain John A. Holly.
Here.
Major Kenneth H. Kelly.
Here.
Captain Joseph M. Orlowski.
Here.
Lieutenant Colonel James E. Ricketts, Jr. Major Edwin B. Welch.
Here.
Captain William R. Baldwin. Colonel Wayne L. Bolte. Captain Robin F. Gatwood. Colonel Anthony R. Gianangeli.
Here.
Colonel Charles A. Levis. Major Henry J. Repetta. Major George F. Sasser. Lieutenant Colonel Henry M. Serix. General Autry, all present or accounted for, sir.
Thank you.
Now, General Autry, if you and General Metcalf will come forward, we will present this memorial to the Air Force Museum, and we'll also lay a wreath, and family members, please come forward to help laying the wreath after the presentation, after General Metcalf's remarks.
General Metcalf, if you would join me here, sir. On behalf of the B-66 Association, sir, and its members, located here with you, we would offer this memorial to the Air Force Museum, and we thank you for your support in getting it built. Sir, yours.
Thank you. That creaking was the microphone, not me. Not my knees. Thank you to this organization for this handsome monument, and it is a handsome monument. Thank you for thinking, as you chose to memorialize your association and your service, thinking about the Air Force Museum as the place to do it. It is the right place. Why a memorial park? I'm asked that often. The good Lord knows the material history of the United States Air Force is well represented in the several buildings behind me. But that's not enough. That certainly isn't enough. Let me share with you some statistics and the changing demographics of our visitors. Only 6% of the American public below the age of 65 have ever served in the military. Any service. That's shocking. But that's the all-volunteer force. People come in and they stay, and the broad base of a draft-based force is eliminated. So be it. But we have to address our visitors as if they too represent the 94%. No service, they don't understand what our service meant to us and why we did it. It's interesting. They come out of great curiosity and increasing numbers. We're probably one of the few museums that has actually grown during these troubling times. But it's interesting to note that families come now and they devour everything on the wall. Now this young group has not grown up with airplanes and don't have the same love for airplanes that we all do. You watch the dynamics in the museum, they read everything on the wall. And then maybe they'll turn and look at the airplane and say, oh, that's it, okay. And they move on and read the next text material. They're hungry for information.